Morning, Delaware. Now, I want you to remember this day and this week in February when it's like 20 below and you're cursing and wishing it was summer.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Yet, and you cursed in the high heat and the humidity this week. In February, just remember this week, okay?
I'm happy for today because today is going to be slightly cooler than yesterday at a whopping 88 degrees.
But I need those thunderstorms because I was out in the garden this morning before I came into the station, and things are wilting.
Yes.
We need some serious rain.
Yes, we got a shower that popped out of nowhere yesterday, lasted for all of 10 minutes, and doused everything.
Just enough to make everything really humid.
Yeah.
All we need.
So, you may have noticed that I did not introduce a guest this morning.
No guest.
Because we are actually both going to talk about something that we talked about a long time ago on the show. Mm-hmm. One of the first shows we did, I think, back in October or November of 2015, we talked about Hamilton and about how you were not a fan. Because you had heard the sound, the original cast recording. Mm-hmm. And but now we've both actually seen it because of Disney Plus.
Right.
Has your opinion changed?
You should also remember this day because my opinion has changed. So let me preface.
All right, preface.
I knew of the Hamilton phenomenon as it was making its way, off Broadway, on Broadway, 2015, and then the Tonys, 2016. It was all over the place. And I had a little bit of, may I say, a burr in my side? Is that a pun?
A burr under your saddle?
Yes.
Perhaps, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And
I'm sorry. I just got the pun. Excuse
did you get the
me.
pun, the burr?
Yes. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Because also in the 2016 Tonys that year was a lot of nominations for the musical Waitress.
Oh, yes. Right.
That's the Sarah Bareilles. I always say her last name wrong. Sarah Bareilles musical. I love Waitress. It's one of my favorites. I've seen it. I've listened to it over and over again. And I was just like, well, because of dumb old Hamilton, Waitress is not going to get its day in the sun.
Right.
So I was a little salty about that one. Also, if you are a regular listener of our show, you know that I have a really hard time understanding accents. I don't like to listen to audiobooks that have strong accents. I have a really hard time. Listening to rap. Even when I watch television, I watch it with the subtitles on. Mm-hmm. So maybe I need my hearing checked, or maybe I'm just a better reader. I don't know overall, but I need to see the words along with. And even as a child, when I would listen to CDs, I would pull out, I had the CD gel, and I would pull out, and I even had some with tapes too, and I would pull out the thing that had the lyrics on it so I could actually read the lyrics that was going on. And so I was like, I can't listen to the Hamilton soundtrack because it is a lot of words and said very fast, and I'm going to miss the story. Mm-hmm. And it made me not really a fan of it. And plus, because I was like, I don't really know about rap and I don't really know the whole story. I'm not really a historian kind of person. I don't like reading historical fiction. And so I was just like, I just don't think it's for me. And so I wrote it off. Mm-hmm. And then it came to Disney Plus, and I was like, well, now I want to see it because I want to give the entire experience a chance. I want to see the characters, the costuming, the setting, the lighting, the choreography,
just the staging.
I mean, I want to see it because I do respect the art of theater. I am a musical theater person. I've been in musical theater my entire life. And so I respect the art of musical theater, and I wanted to see it. And so it came to Disney Plus. Of course, I have Disney Plus.
I think were one of the first people I know who signed up for Disney Plus when it was first announced.
I pre-signed up for it.
I thought so, yeah.
Yes. I was like, a thing that gives me all Disney on demand. Okay.
Sign me up, yes.
I'm there. So it came to Disney Plus on Friday, July 3rd, and I was on vacation in Hocking Hills and with my family, and they had a smart TV that had all of the accounts on it, Netflix, Disney Plus, and so we watched it. And I'm in. and I'm in deep. I mean, my husband. So we were. My husband was I pulled in the driveway last night, and he was making something for dinner, and he was afraid he was going to burn something. And as he was getting ready to burn something, I was like, "Let it burn." I started singing Eliza Hamilton's Burn song, and then I was like, "Wait, don't throw away my shot." And he was like, "Stop it." So I don't know if it would have been better if I got on the bandwagon 5 years ago, or if I am just adding to the chaos in our home now.
So, I had enjoyed the original cast recording, loved it very much, would listen to it regularly and everything, but seeing it was so different.
Well, and we've talked with our colleagues about this all week.
Yes.
And one of the
I
things,
think everybody in the library practically has seen this thing.
Right. And one of the things that was mentioned was people who you might have thought said one thing in the recording, if you weren't looking at like the libretto, you are like, "Oh, they said that."
Right.
I think it helps you fall in love with the characters more too, just to kind of see their entire persona and to respect the actors who played those characters. I mean, David Diggs does such a transfer. Well, it's not too much of a transformation because both who he plays, the Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson, they're both kind of outlandish characters in the show. But he does such an amazing job swapping between those two characters.
I love the way that the show's actually constructed because the first act is really frenetic. There's so much going on, so much happening. It's he comes to New York, he meets Burr, and he meets the rest of the compatriots. The revolution happens. He writes the Federalist Papers. He's Secretary of Treasury, and then you're in. It's like bam, 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 bam. And then the second act is like his downfall. Yes. And it's so much slower and it's so much more contemplative. And the music is so much more lyrical. It's just because that's when his son is killed. He has the longing for Angelica. He has the affair and the aftermath of the affair and then the duel and everything. And then what happens to Eliza after he dies, which is fascinating.
Well, I think the opening song of the entire musical and the closing song of the entire musical both encapsulate so much information.
Yes.
I mean, decades worth of information in both of those songs and compiled into 6 minutes.
Right.
It's just absolutely brilliant how the writer and creator, Lin-Manuel Miranda, put it all together. And George, I think I mentioned this to you, is that I really enjoyed Act 1 of the show because it was very operatic in the sense that if you know traditional opera, you know that there are themes that are played throughout the entire musical. And you know when you hear this character, oh, that's so-and-so's theme. And when this character walks on stage, there's so-and-so's theme. I mean, that goes into even cinematic movies.
Sure.
You know Darth Vader's music. You know all of the other, Star Wars people.
Paris theme and Gone with the Wind and things like that. Yes,
exactly.
Right.
So the first act I felt was very operatic. There was a beat that thread the entire first act together, and it was one beautiful unit. And when you watch the movie on Disney Plus, there might have only been 2 breaks for applause in the entire first half. One, of course, is after King George.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Which was intentional, of course. If you read more about it, you read that it was intentional, that all of these pieces are beautifully thread together, and then King George interrupts it.
Right.
Because that's exactly what King George wanted to do.
Yes.
And then you get into the second act, and I felt it was so much more choppy that it made me it was just, everything was very abrupt. But you're right, it spans more time. There's more time in between.
Yep.
There's a lot more growth of the characters. And you have to have the first act to love those characters in order to have the second act so that you can empathize with them when they fall.
Right. Yes, that's brilliant. That's I love the way it was described. I was doing some research on this, and the Durham Performing Arts Center, and I think they came up with this tagline. I've never seen it anywhere else. The story of America then, told by America now.
Yes.
Isn't that brilliant?
Yes. So I'm watching the musical on Disney Plus. I'm obsessed with it, I can say. I have a healthy obsession with it at this point. I've watched it 4 or 5 times. And and I even find myself just fast forwarding to some of my favorite parts. And I wanted to see what extras they have, because Disney's great with adding extras on their DVDs and even on Disney Plus. And there's one extra that comes with this right now. Who knows if there'll be more later. But there's one that comes with it right now. And it was basically a Zoom call between most of the original Broadway artists and the creators, and then the creative director who put the movie together. And that was one of the things that they talk about was, we had to cast it with people of color. That might have been one of the questions that you would see if you're asking, why are we taking a musical about founding fathers and it's completely cast with 90% people of color? And it's because it's told by our nation today.
Right.
It's our nation then, told by our nation today. And it's also, Lin-Manuel also throws in, it's also a rap. So that would feel kind of awkward
yes,
if you
definitely.
didn't.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But the interesting thing is right after I watched Hamilton on Friday, on the 4th, I watched 1776 on Turner Classic Movies.
Yes.
And it is so interesting to compare and contrast those because 1776 is a very traditional musical.
Yes.
I mean, it could have been done any time before about 1990. But as it was done in the late 60s and early 70s. And it's all about the writing of the initial draft of the Declaration of Independence, the Continental Congress, as they fight and argue and work on the Declaration of Independence, whether they're actually going to declare independency from Great Britain or not. And one of the things that Lin-Manuel has been criticized about Hamilton is that they don't talk about slavery very much. Right. It's like a throwaway line and it's just gone.
Or a very subtle nod by Washington at the very end when Eliza said she criticizes slavery.
Right. And then there's a little bit about in the rap when Jefferson and Hamilton are arguing about the bank.
Yes, we know who plants the crops.
Does the plants, right?
Yes,
But 1776 has a long song.
Yes.
Right towards the end called Molasses to Rum.
It's one of my favorites,
where John
actually.
Rutledge, John Rutledge, he doesn't defend slavery as much as saying, this is wrong, but we're all in it together. And it's brilliant. John Cullum, who you might know from Northern Exposure, he was the older shopkeeper and bartender in Northern Exposure, but he's had a long Broadway career, and he does this in the movie. Brilliant voice, brilliant song. It is so different because it takes that and puts the slavery issue right at the heart of the Declaration of Independence. And I thought that was brilliant. And the other historical musical this reminds me of in some ways is Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson.
Oh, yes.
Catco did that a couple of years ago in Columbus. And it is a pure rock musical like Hedwig or any of those,
right,
but about Andrew Jackson. And it does not love Andrew Jackson. I'll tell you that. The spoiler alert. It hates Andrew Jackson and makes him look like the racist bully that he was, and so it's interesting to put those three together.
Yes,
and look at like the Declaration, the founding of the actual country, and then what happened 50 years after independence.
And I think you bring up a really good point because history has really vilified Aaron Burr as the man who shot Hamilton, and he's gone on after that to do many other questionable things.
Right,
but he really gets a totally terrible look in all of the history books. And yet in this musical, if you don't know the story of what's happening, you love him. You love him from the beginning. And I think Gage has a song kind of queued up. My favorite song in the entire musical is Burr's song, Wait For It. So here's a little taste of that.
Theodosia writes me a letter every
Leslie
day.
Odom Jr.
Yes.
So good. So he's telling a love story about a woman who he's having an affair with, and then it turns into, but I want all of these things, and why is Hamilton getting all these things? And so it's a love-hate song,
right,
actually.
Exactly, yeah.
Sounds like it, yeah.
But this explains why Hamilton backs Jefferson instead of Burr in the 1800 election.
Yes.
Because he knows what Jefferson stands for, and Burr, because he's always waiting, always looking, always playing the game, he never knows what Burr stands for. And that's why he backs Jefferson, and that kind of leads to Hamilton's downfall.
Exactly.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's just so well done. Okay, enough about Hamilton. We are going to take a break. There's never enough about Hamilton, yes. But we are going to take a break here. If this has inspired you to listen to it, the Hoopla has the Hamilton soundtrack. You can download it for a month, listen to it at your leisure, listen to it over and over again. If you have, and then if you want to, you can sign up for Disney Plus and see it. And if it ever comes out on DVD, you know the library will have it.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to take a break here. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about some library stuff in the second half of the show.
There you go.
74 degrees. You're listening to Off the Shelf on 92.9 and 1550 WDLR.
And welcome back to Off the Shelf. We are here with Nicole Fowles, and I'm George Needham, director of the library. I want to thank the Friends of the Library and let you know that next week our guest will be Karen Cowan, who will be talking about 2 upcoming events that the Friends of the Library are sponsoring. Yes, the Friends of the Library are actually sponsoring stuff again. And we are so glad that they're able to do that, and they have hung in with us throughout the pandemic and all the things we've been going through. So anyway, you mentioned, we're going to just talk one last thing about Hamilton.
I said it's never enough.
Because Nicole mentioned something that I did not pick up on it originally. But talk about the characters that we were just talking about.
And you wouldn't know about it if you have only ever listened to the soundtrack. Right. This is one of those moments where you absolutely have to see it. It is a character that Lin-Manuel describes as the bullet. And basically, at one point, there is a shot that's if you're listening to the soundtrack during the song "Stay Alive," there's a British Revolution officer who fires the bullet, and a character grabs the bullet, theoretically, and she kind of carries it through the air, and she carries it toward Hamilton. He's writing at his desk, and he looks down, and so it just misses him. And from that moment on, actually, she becomes the bullet before that, after King George. King George sings his song, and she is kind of caught as a spy, and she's slain at that point. And then from there on, she becomes the bullet. She almost becomes this omen of death. And so if you watch for her in the musical, you'll see her after King George's song. I just forgot the title of it.
You'll Be Back.
You'll Be Back. You'll see her after King George's song, You'll Be Back. She's the one who gets killed after his song. And then you watch her throughout the rest of the musical, and she becomes this omen of death. And any character who will have death at some point during this musical has very close interactions with her in very specific ways right before they meet their demise.
So it's just something else to watch for if you watch it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Book Buzz.
Let's talk about Book Buzz. Yesterday, HarperCollins, they are a book publisher in the book world. They hosted a 3-hour
Bookapalooza.
Bookapalooza, and talked about a lot of really exciting books that are going to be published in the next, kind of 4 to 12 months. Okay. They went as far out as summer of 2021. But there were some really exciting titles in there, some by authors that you've never heard of before, some by authors who you know and love. And so I spent a good chunk of my day listening to that. But of course, it was 3 hours, so I put it on the background and did work on my other screen.
Thank you.
During the other part of the day. I know, that's what you pay me for, right? I watched a 3-hour webinar today about books. So one of the fun ones that really caught my eye was a novel that is going to be published on October 13th of 2020, and it is called Goodnight Beautiful. It's a novel by Amy Malloy, and she also wrote the book The Perfect Mother, if you've heard of Amy Malloy or if you've heard of The Perfect Mother.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You know
this
one?
That was a big hit a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she's got another one coming out, and they describe it as this irresistible psychological thriller. It's a newly married woman who is your protagonist, and her life is turned upside down. Her husband goes missing. It sounded like from the HarperCollins description that it's going to be kind of an unreliable narrator, which is one of my favorites.
Yes.
She really is going to, what they say is, artfully deceive you while holding you firmly in her grasp.
Ooh.
So you're not going to be able to really escape the story, but you're going to be totally fooled by the end of it.
I love that.
So that one sounded like a lot of fun. There is another one that was called We Are Each Other's Harvest by Natalie Bazile, or Bazile. That one is coming out in 2021, so you're going to need to look for it in April of 2021. She also wrote a book called Queen Sugar, which is a critically acclaimed series on the OWN network, which is Oprah's network.
Okay.
It's an exploration and a celebration of black farming in America.
Oh.
And so it's going to be a little bit of everything. It's going to be essays, poems, paragraphs, quotes, and even conversations and first-person stories to examine the black people's connection to the American land from emancipation all the way to the 21st century.
That sounds really interesting.
Yes,
that's something that's not talked about a lot.
No. It's kind of like you mentioned last week, the role of black cowboys in the Wild West of America.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that one was called We Are Each Other's Harvest by Natalie. I'm going to say her last name, Bazile, Bazile. What about you, George? Are you reading anything?
Well, yes, I actually did read something this week. It's a kid's book. I don't ordinarily read kids' books, but
You leave that to me.
Yes, I do. But Harlow Lawson, our Ostrander branch manager, told me about this book when I was in the branch on Tuesday when we did our opening, and it was definitely worth reading. It's a book called 1919, The Year That Changed America. It was written by Martin Sandler, and it was published last year, and it won the National Book Award last year for children's literature. It's intended for middle school students, but it's a good overview for anyone who's interested in a pivotal year in American history. Some of the key events that happened that year: the first communist scare in the United States, the Palmer raids that followed World War I, when there was a big concern that communism, and especially Bolshevism, like had happened in Russia, was coming to the United States. There were mass deportations of people who were suspected of being socialists or Bolsheviks, including Emma Goldman, who, if you know Ragtime, was a character in that, speaking of musicals, but was also a famous speaker back at the turn of the last century. The Red Summer, when African Americans returning from World War I were trying to fight for their rights. They just fought for freedom in Europe, and now they were getting Jim Crow and the kind of segregation in the South. And they fought back when there were a number of riots of frequently the Klan or other kind of white supremacists, and they fought back for the first time. And it sort of laid the groundwork for the Harlem Renaissance and for the civil rights movement of the 1940s and 50s. Both the 18th and the 19th Amendment came through during that year. So the 18th Amendment was prohibition. We all know how that worked out. And then the 19th Amendment was the votes for women.
That's right.
And the nice thing about this book is it has lots of sidebars and little anecdotes about famous people who were involved in these things. Billy Sunday, who was the baseball player who became a preacher and was one of the leaders in the Prohibition movement. And Ida Tarbell, the African-American journalist who was critical of the women's suffrage movement because it was very racist, actually. They were for votes for white women. They weren't necessarily votes for black women.
All women. Interesting.
So, again, the Harlem Renaissance, the Chicago Black Sox scandal that happened that year. The first aviators to actually fly nonstop across the Atlantic was in 1919. It wasn't Charles Lindbergh in 27.
Okay.
He was the first one to fly solo. But these were two gentlemen who flew across the Atlantic in a open cockpit biplane. 15 hours from Newfoundland to Ireland.
Must have been cold.
When they landed, they thought it was a green field. They landed in a bog. The plane was like parallel. They weren't hurt, but it was not the way they planned to land.
And they got out and they said, "Man, it's cold here."
Exactly. So anyway, it's called 1919, The Year That Changed America, and it's definitely worth a read whether you're a kid or an adult. I think you'll find it interesting. By the way, my fact checker at home, Joyce, let me know it was not Catco that did Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. It was Available Light Theater, so I should get that right.
Proper credit where credit is due.
That's
yes. Right. And if you like the Hamilton things that we have been talking about this whole show, ask any of our librarians. We have two really fabulous lists that our librarians have put together. If you like Hamilton, fiction and nonfiction for all ages. So it's got books for kids, teens, and adults in it. And then they've also got this one specifically for teens, Rise Up, books on the resistance and revolution. So, if you listen to Hamilton and now you want to go fight for your own cause, these are mostly going to be young adult books, but they're going to be series like the Red Queen series, the Flawed series, the Taken series, the Ink and Bone series. So those are all recommendations on those lists. They'll have them at your local library.
Great. And we do have some events coming up this week. Check out DelawareLibrary.org for your information about the things that are coming up, all online virtual type events, but some virtual book chats, good program for teens on writing your story that's coming up on Friday.
Yes.
So take a look at our website, DelawareLibrary.org, and you can find more information about all of those on the website there.
Yes. And please register when it asks for registration, even if you don't think you're going to make it, because we'll add you to an email list so that'll get you the code so that you can get onto those Zoom calls. Even if there's a thread of you that might want to go ahead and register.
That makes perfect sense. So thank you very much, Nicole.
Always a pleasure.
Gage, thank you very much for putting up with our Hamilton dialogue here.
My pleasure.
And always a pleasure working with you. Thanks to our friends at the library for sponsoring the show, and we will see you in the stacks.